On this edition, I'm going to talk about what's next for Daniel Cormier. Now, Daniel Cormier won the Strikeforce Heavyweight Grand Prix, defeating Josh Barnett in just decisive fashion, just very dominant fight for him. And the plan was, well, Daniel Cormier is binded to one more fight in Strikeforce. It's just that's how the deal goes. Even though Daniel Cormier is most definitely UFC ready, he still has one more fight. That's just a part of how it's going to work. So what the UFC and Zuffa did was they matched up Daniel Cormier with Frank Mir. And this fight makes a lot of sense, or it made a lot of sense, is the fact that Frank Mir is coming off of a loss to Junior Dos Santos for the heavyweight title, and Daniel Cormier is coming off of winning the Strikeforce Heavyweight Grand Prix. Actually, he's the quote-unquote heavyweight champion in Strikeforce. So this fight makes a lot of sense for both guys based on where they stand in the division. But what ended up happening is Frank Mir is injured, and he's out of the fight. So the Zuffa and the UFC are looking for potential opponents for Daniel Cormier. I think a lot of this comes down to where you see where Daniel Cormier stands in the heavyweight division. And me personally thinks that Daniel Cormier is a top 5 heavyweight based on his skill set, what he's done, and what he is going to do in future years. Just it's undeniable, his talent and just what he brings to the table. So the rumors around, I think Dana White told us that Matt Mitrione was offered the fight. He turned it down. There's also been rumblings about Pat Barry and Daniel Cormier fighting. I just think both of these matchups, Mitrione and Pat Barry, Pat Barry and Mitrione are good fighters. I think they're both good guys. I'm a fan of both, but I just think they're both in the middle of the division, the middle of the pack. I think maybe gatekeepers, if you want to call them that. They don't stand where Daniel Cormier is in the division. But I think it's a fight that Daniel Cormier wins, both fights. But I think a fight that really would make sense in this sense would be Daniel Cormier versus Fabricio Werdum. I think both guys stand really in the same position. I think they're maybe one or a couple fights away from receiving a title shot. And I think it also makes sense to the fact that, you know, Fabricio Werdum's come over from Strikeforce. He's had success in the UFC. It's something that it's not new to him. I think he'd be willing to do so. I mean, if you give him some sort of reason to do so, maybe you say this is for the right to the next title shot. But I think also what's come out recently is that Stefan Struve wants to face Fabricio Werdum, which is a fight that also makes sense. I think the right fight that needs to be made is Fabricio Werdum versus Daniel Cormier, a fight that makes 100% sense based on where each guy stands in the division. So there's also the other idea, is the fact that how long can Daniel Cormier fight at heavyweight with Cain Velasquez fighting at heavyweight? Both guys are friends. They're both training partners. They're both teammates at American Kickboxing Academy. And both guys, I mean, if they had to fight each other, I think they would. But I think what it comes down to is the fact that one of these guys is going to have to leave the division. I think the guy that will leave is Daniel Cormier. Because Cain Velasquez is fighting Junior Dos Santos for a title shot. He's next in line, be facing him, I believe it's at UFC 155. So what will end up happening is that, you know, I think it just doesn't work, is that Daniel Cormier will have to drop to light heavyweight if that's what is to happen. These two really don't want to fight each other. And I think what will happen is that Daniel Cormier will drop down to light heavyweight. Just the problem in the past was the fact that Daniel Cormier had kidney failure training in the Olympics to cut weight. I think that's part of the reason why he fights at heavyweight and why he is an undersized heavyweight. I think if he didn't have those problems in the past, I think the weight that makes the most sense for Cormier is that he'd be fighting at light heavyweight. But I think Daniel Cormier, if he could do the weight cut the right way, not saying he was doing it wrong in the past, I think light heavyweight is most definitely the division that makes the most sense for Daniel Cormier. And a lot of people say is that, you know, Daniel Cormier's doing fine at heavyweight. Guy hasn't lost a fight yet, so I mean, why would he move? I just think if he didn't want to end up crossing paths with Cain Velasquez, a teammate of his, and also he's his wrestling coach. So it just, I don't think it was a fight that these two guys want to do. If you put something on the line, maybe they'll fight, but if someone's to move, it will definitely be Daniel Cormier. But that's the whole idea, is that Dana White also said that, you know, I mean, someone brought up the idea to him, and, you know, Jon Jones and Cormier is most definitely an interesting fight. I think Daniel Cormier poses a lot of problems for Jon Jones, is the fact that Daniel Cormier is an outstanding wrestler. You can't just dump him to the ground. His striking is coming a long way, and he's a very tough guy. He's not easy to put away. So I think it would be a good fight. When we continue to look for people who can dethrone Jon Jones, I think Daniel Cormier is most definitely an option as well. But it comes down to what is to happen next for Cormier, and I think, once again, it will be Pat Barry. I don't think he's going to be sticking around, though, if he's going to have to face Cain Velasquez. So we'll see what happens. I mean, once again, Pat Barry, it'll be Pat Barry versus Daniel Cormier. I think the right fight would be Fabricio Werdum versus Daniel Cormier for a potential title shot. But I think it comes down to what happens with Alistair Overeem. If they're going to give Overeem the Junior Dos Santos or Cain Velasquez, I think it comes down to that. But there's a lot on the line. I mean, not a lot on the line. There's just a lot of different options that could happen. Just depends on what Zuffa and the UFC and Dana White are going to do about it. So I personally can't wait to see Daniel Cormier fight again. I think he has a bright future in mixed martial arts. He's a good fighter, and he's a class act. So we'll see what happens. And that's why for this edition. This is Kyle Delaney signing off. I'm out of here.